Well, hi there, and welcome along to Jump to It here on irishracing.com. You are watching the Monday review and lots to look back on and reflect upon on today's show. And obviously, the headline being the passing of the legend that is Lester Piggott, who passed away peacefully at the age of 86 over the weekend. I'd like to bring in Stephen Harris, as always, to discuss the matters here. Everything in the racing world is trivial to a large extent, isn't it? Then we've got the important issue of Leicester passing away. One of the game's greats, the word legend is thrown around in far too much populace, I think it's fair to say. But he really was not only a legend within the weighing room, I think it's fair to say out of the weighing room and off the course, if you like, Stephen. There were all sorts of legendary stories. And of course, it didn't always work out great for him in many aspects. But looking at his career, I mean, it is a phenomenal CV, isn't it? 9 Derby wins, 8 St. Leger wins. Just fantastic. The best part of 4,500 wins under rules on the track. An absolute legend that will be sorely missed.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the few people, Ed, wasn't he? We live in a world, we talk to each other, don't we? And racing is a small world, really, and very few names ever really break through beyond that sort of bubble. I think Lester Piggott was the person who did that, probably McCoy and Dettori since then. But I mean, going back into the old days, I mean, I started off going race probably in my teens, and I think Piggott was still just about riding. Maybe he'd come back from a retirement or two at that time, but he used to have a massive following. It was the days before the internet, of course, and there was less on for people to be occupied with. So if Leicester was riding at a race meeting, it used to add sort of hundreds to the gate. People used to go and see him, particularly towards the end of his career. As you said, you've touched on a few of those stats. I mean, when you see them in front of you, 9 derbies, 9 Oaks, champion jockey 11 times, 30 classics in Britain, 3 Arcs, 5 Irish derbies. I think worldwide he rode over 5,000 winners. He came back and won in America after he'd come out of retirement. Of course, that's a memorable race. You can watch it on YouTube. It still gets the spine tingling. And there's so many good stories, aren't there? I mean, I think it's fair to say often when someone passes away, there's obviously a touch of sadness for the family, but he had a wonderful innings, didn't he? He was 86. It's probably about the right time to go. A terrific life. He was riding. I think that I've read that he started off when he was 14. Of course, when we used to send boys up chimneys to clean them, and he rode more winners than any sort of 14 or 15-year-old ever. And of course, that's something that will never be repeated. And there's so many stories. I mean, I think some of the best ones I saw are mainly on Twitter, of course. It used to all be on the Betfair forum in the old days, but he was on a percentage of the crowd one day at Nottingham, and someone asked, how many people have they got in Leicester? He said, 5,984. He said, how on earth do you know that? He said, I've counted them. He was that sort. A lot of the stories do involve a pound note, don't they? I think it's fair to say that he was very keen on a pound note.
Well, it's some wonderful memories there. I suppose we could spend the whole show talking about Leicester just on his own. I'm glad you mentioned, though, the Breeders' Cup in 1990 Royal Academy, because I actually think, in the context, that is arguably my favourite moment of Lester Piggott's career. I mean, to put it, just think about it bluntly. You've got Lester Piggott stopped riding in 1985. He was then imprisoned for tax fraud. He hasn't sat on a horse in public for 5 years. At 12 days' notice, he announces at the age of 54 he's coming out of retirement, flies to New York, and wins the Breeders' Cup Mile. I mean, this is bonkers stuff, to put it bluntly. I mean, it's crackers. I was trying to think of kind of comeback stories. Tiger Woods winning the Masters on the back of spinal fusion surgery coming out. I mean, the fair play, that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And maybe Lester Piggott winning a race at the age of 54 isn't in the same kind of ballpark. But nonetheless, if you break down the raw facts of that, you're not going to see things like that happen again. But that kind of summed up Lester Piggott, didn't he, really? There was never really a dull moment on or off the track. And as you say, if you haven't seen it, 99% of audience probably have seen it, but watch Royal Academy's win in the Breeders' Cup Mile. There's almost this disbelief in the commentary box, isn't there? As Leicester at 54, nearly 3 times the age of sometimes some of the jockeys he's racing against, swoops down the outside and gets the job done. But yeah, remarkable. I mean, anything else in terms of individual horses, Stephen, which really kind of lit things up from your perspective with Leicester on board?
was it the Minstrel and Tinoso and all these the Derby winners? He was absolutely brilliant round Epsom. I read another really good article saying about, which is relevant with the week coming up, of course, the weekend, that Epsom's a really difficult track to ride with that sharp turn early. And if you don't get a really good early pitch, you're going to get squeezed off by all the others coming around the outside. And he probably rode Epsom, which is a roller coaster of a track, as we're going to see this week, better than anybody else. Just to tell one more boring story, he
Please do.
used to ride for. The thing with Leicester is the reason he fell out with Vincent O'Brien at various stages is he was extremely mercenary, and or if you put it another way, he was extremely shrewd businessman. And when he wanted to ride for the trainers who had the best chance of winning the races. So he'd go to every track in the country, and it was sort of a sort of prototype Dave Roberts almost, fishing around trying to find out what the fancied runners were. And apparently he rode a horse for Peter Easterby in about the 1980s that was owned by a local farmer, and Easterby told him in no uncertain terms, Lester, this is a certainty. You're not going to get a fee. It'll win. If you win, the farmer's going to give you a large bag of potatoes as your reward. But he needed to win the championship. Anyway, the horse duly bolted up, landed a wholesale gamble for the Easterbys, etc., etc. Anyway, 25 years later, Peter Easterby was playing golf with Leicester in Dubai, apparently, both appalling golfers. And they played 9 holes. It was all going, having a nice chat. And Leicester turned round on the 10th and said, I never got that bag of spuds I was promised. 25 years later. I mean, he sort of remembered it. The first time he mentioned it since. I mean, it's a great story. Isn't it?
Whilst in Dubai,
There's another one as well. An apprentice jockey knew that Leicester was flying back from some meeting at Hamilton or something, back down to Newmarket or wherever he lived at that time. And he said, Leicester, do you think I could get a lift? I've got to get back for the evening meeting or whatever. So Leicester said, all right, you go on, you go on. Gave him a lift in the old helicopter or private. I think it was a helicopter in those days. They used to fly around it. And it's a really nice gesture. Anyway, a week later, the lad got a letter in the post, and it was an invoice for 120 quid for the helicopter. I mean, there's so many of these stories that you could literally just write a book about them, but no, he was a great character. And as I say, we've got Dettori in more recent times, haven't we? Who's a public figure that people just back his mounts, and Leicester did that for about 30 years. He had that huge following, and nearly everything he rode started at the front of the market, and he rode an incredible number of winners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summed up a lot of what was great there about Leicester. As I said, we could go on to midnight talking about some of these great stories and some of the great horses he rode. As you say, look at that CV, unbelievable realm of classic wins to his name. But yeah, Lester Piggott, reflecting on there, who passed away at the age of 86 over the weekend. Now, I did mention there were other issues we want to talk about in the context of a more trivial nature. Nonetheless, we will discuss them because recently, been lots of talk about meeting abandonments, haven't there, Stephen? This is something which has really been coming to the boil in recent times. On Friday night, Haydock abandoned their meeting. We had Chester after 4 races on Saturday. Drew Stubbs as well. It's a huge backlash on social media on the back of that. And then on Monday, the time of recording, a couple of races on the turf at Lingfield had to be knocked on the head as well. I mean, look, we're all amateur ground staff here, but I mean, what is going on? This seems to be a relatively new phenomenon, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the result of watering, isn't it? That's the long and the short of it. Nothing annoys punters more, and we're seeing it more and more and more. The first thing to say is a lot of these meetings start off when you open your newspaper or internet browser in the morning and you see it's good to firm, good in places. And by the time you get round to racing, it's actually good to soft. And this happens on a regular basis. And the reason it happens is because the clerks of the course have decided to water, and they don't say that the ground's changed because they know that all the runners have been declared on good or faster ground, and they don't want to suddenly have 25 non-runners and look ridiculous. But I mean, the slipping, which is suddenly, for some strange reason in the past week, become really prominent. I don't know whether this is a jockey's initiative that they're being much more vigilant and they don't want to race if they think it's in any way dangerous. But I think we've had 3 or 4 meetings abandoned. Lingfield today have just lost 2 of their races on the round course, which ironically was the last meeting they were going to stage on the turf course. They're switching them all to the all-weather. And apparently Martin Cruddas of ARC was been saying today that they wanted to race this meeting on the all weather, but weren't allowed to by the BHA. So typical racing. Far too many chiefs, not enough Indians, lots of people blaming each other, and the BHA seemingly a sort of hapless observer as racing descends into a shambles. I think Eve Johnson-Horton said in a tweet today, Ed, it's an embarrassment. She's ashamed to be part of the industry. It's become an embarrassment, and it has. I mean, it costs people. It's costing trainers sending horses to the races in the last week tens of thousands of pounds for fruitless trips. There's decent holiday crowds at some of these tracks. Haydock on Saturday, Chester was mobbed out the other day, and they abandoned halfway through. I mean, it doesn't do wonders for racing, does it? If you've spent your 200 quid taking your family to the races on Saturday, you get 4 races in and something slips up, the sun's shining, they've had 1 millimetre of rain in the last 24 hours and horses are slipping up because they've been watering. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's not good, is it?
No, I think that the general consensus would be it's unacceptable, which is something I'm glad you alluded to Eve Johnson-Horton's tweet. She took to Twitter earlier, didn't she, to say it was embarrassment, it was a laughing stock. But she also made the point, saying that a lot of trainers, if they messed up, they would be hounded by the BHA, whereas there seems to be this attitude that ground staff or those responsible for reducing the ground are not doing so to a level needed in order for horses to race. And yet the attitude seems to be, oh, well, that's the way it is. Right, on to the next day, and we move on. There seems to be no penalty for the ground staff not producing what appears to be satisfactory
No.
ground. So she seemed very unhappy with that. Richard Hughes as well was very vocal. He mentioned the word incompetence in his tweet in relation to the fiasco at Haydock the other night. I mean, it does seem to rile a lot of people up. And as you say, there seems to be a lot of passing of the buck in regards to the blame. And I suppose a lot of it is where does the buck stop and who essentially should take the share of the blame.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't new, Ed, is it? We've been banging on about this for
Yeah.
years, and so have
This
a lot of
time
other
last year.
punters. Yeah, punters absolutely hate the watering, unless it's going to be hard or firm. It's just completely. They're watering on basically good ground or the slightly faster side of good, which, according to the BHA directive, is how they should be producing the tracks. You don't need to water on good to firm ground. That's proper flat racing ground. Now it's slightly different at places like Fontwell and Utoxeter. Maybe trainers won't run on fast ground, which is another issue that we're going to come on to. Summer jumping, is a major is in major difficulties, not necessarily because of the ground, because of tiny fields and uncompetitive racing. But I just feel the clerks of the course have got to take responsibility. There are some good clerks of the courses. Andrew Cooper does a brilliant job at Sandown and Epsom. He keeps everybody informed. I think I can think of one occasion in about the last 20 years where he got things wrong at Sandown. He watered. I think it then rained and it turned into good to soft or soft for a flat meeting. And the trainers were, I think it was when Barry Hills was still involved before Charlie Hills. They were absolutely furious. But that's going to happen. You're going to make the odd mistake. But this seems to be some sort of major structural problem where the clerks are just watering basically ahead of every meeting. And slowly, we've had a dry spring. The ground's rock hard underneath this initial layer of lush grass that is encouraged to grow quickly by watering, and it just becomes slippery. They had 3 millimetres of rain on Monday at Lingfield. 3 millimetres. It was good to firm in the morning. After the second race, they changed it to good to soft. I mean, it's complete nonsense. I mean, if you're a punter who spent 5 hours doing the card on fast ground there, you've just wasted your time, haven't you? And that's the thing that's irritating. I mean, we're punters. If you're a trainer or an owner who spent a lot of money entering their horse, travelling there for 6 or 7 hours, I mean, your blood has got to be boiling. And as Eve Johnson-Horton says, nobody seems to ever take the blame. It's never anyone's. It's the weather. We had to water. It was getting a bit fast. It's always an exercise in buck passing. And the BHA now, which for years has been an absolute abysmally run shambles, is now completely anonymous. I mean, I bet if you ask 50 people, most of them wouldn't know who ran the BHA now. It just seems to sort of hiding away, slipping along, stumbling from disaster to disaster, really, with nobody taking responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of points raised there. I mean, hopefully, maybe in the future we can get someone on from a ground staff perspective, perhaps to enlighten us as to, add some balance here as to what exactly is going on. Just finally on this fiasco, we must touch upon, there's a lot of layers to this topic. Not picking on Chester specifically, but I am in regards to this press release after there was massive uproar on Saturday, where Chester was abandoned after 4 races on a really busy Saturday fixture, start of half term. Now, as per the terms and conditions of purchasing a ticket for Chester on Saturday, if the feature race, aka the 4th race of the card, takes place, and no one or no attendee is therefore permitted to not even a partial or fully a refund on the back of that. So, look, the conspiracy theorists are out in full saying, well, if the ground was unsafe, well, how's it suddenly become unsafe after the 4th race and it wasn't before the 4th race 20 minutes earlier? And this has left a real sour taste in everyone's mouths. And also, then there was the tweet that went out for the official press release from Chester, which I think you'd probably, I'm not going to read it out word for word on here, Stephen, but it was quite curt, wasn't it? And it was basically along the lines of, you've done your money. Sorry, we can't give you a refund. Subsequently, Chester have gone on record to say they're discussing the situation. Could those who purchased a ticket, please, bear with us. We're going to get in touch for some form of compensation. It would appear, perhaps with retrospect, they realised they were a bit blunt and curt in the message. But this adds a different thing, doesn't it? In terms of, like, someone made the analogy on social media. I thought it was quite good. It had a lot of crossover. Someone said if you went to watch the new Top Gun film at the cinema, and a 2-hour-long film, and after an hour and 35 minutes, someone from your cinema working there just all the lights went off, the film stopped, said, "Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. If you please make your way to the exit, you can catch the final 20 minutes of Top Gun in 5 months' time via your streaming services. Thank you and good night." There will be absolute riots. But there seems to be this acceptance within racing. Oh, well, that's the directive. That's the way it is. I suppose, is there a time to look at different policies, perhaps in terms of these self-fulfilled policies? Obviously, they're there to kind of cover the back of the race courses. But it's a very fine line to tread if you keep doing these things. As you say, attendances are down at the moment. People are getting put off. Costs are rising with everything. If you're spending the best part of £150 to go and watch 3 or 4 races and to go home again, where's the incentive for you ever to return to a race course?
I can completely agree with you. And actually, in another way, the cinema comparison is a really good one, because 20 or 30 years ago, there used to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cinemas. There was 1 or 2 in every single town. And now they've sort of disappeared by about 3/4. And the reason they've disappeared, obviously, is because people have got satellite television, cable television. They can watch films and stream films on the internet, on their televisions through satellite. And of course, relatively speaking, cinemas became extremely expensive. Well, race courses are also charging exorbitant fees for drinks, popcorn, whatever you want to, sandwiches you want to have, as they do at cinemas. And people vote with their feet, Ed, and people will vote with their feet. I mean, I think at Chester, I'm right in saying it was 50 quid to get into Tats. I mean, it's got to a tipping point now where they're going to find that the attendances, and I think they already are going to fall off a cliff. And things like this, just incompetence with the track preparation, is not going to help matters. And as you rightly said, that the way it was done was a curt sort of press release where, thanks for coming, sorry it got abandoned, no refund, see you at the next meeting. I mean, it's just terrible, terrible way to treat your customers, aside of the sort of the going issue. And here's the other thing, Ed. This isn't Top Gun they're showing at Chester. It's a load of low-grade handicaps in the. It's not even good racing. I mean, we're going to come on to what we've had this weekend in a minute, but I mean, the racing on Sunday was sort of 18 sellers over jumps, more or less. I mean, I'm being a bit unfair. There were a couple of decent handicaps at Utoxeter, but it's sort of really catering to the lowest possible, cheapest possible form of entertainment, while sort of knowing that you're going to get a big family crowd in. And I mean, Chester, in a way, is a victim of its own success. They know they're going to be packed out, generally speaking. It's just one of those tracks. It's in a brilliant location. It's unique, and they think they can get away with anything. And maybe it'll finally come back to bite them. The least they can do, surely, is offer people a free bottle of wine or half-price admission to the next meeting or something as a gesture. They can't just turn them away after a few races and say, thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there'll be more to come from that. Chester, as I said, have gone on record just before we came on air to say they are, considering what has happened at the weekend. So if you did purchase a ticket and you had to leave early, you know, they will be in touch, essentially, is the bottom line. So, yeah, I'm sure there'll be more fallout definitely from that. Our final kind of grumble, if you like, on the Monday review, will be looking back at the fixture list, specifically what we had at the weekend, Stephen. I mean, we touched upon it beforehand. You know, 8 meetings in England or in the UK. There were 2 in Ireland on Saturday. I mean, it was absolutely cracker stuff, especially considering there were international sporting events going on at the same time. But then on Sunday, you know, we're 2 days before June or whatever, and we had 3 jumps meetings in England and 1 in Ireland. Small fields, fast ground, total imbalance, poorly attended, just everything just seems to be, how should we say, just a lack of balance, and seems on the face of it to have been put together without very little thought.
No, well, I mean, there isn't any planning. That's the long and the short of it. There just isn't. The tracks have been given a free for all. What day do you want to race, more or less? And they all say Saturday because they might get a few thousand in. And for the long term good of the sport and the people who are interested in betting in it, which is actually what funds it after all. But all it's going to do, and I'm sure it already is. I mean, I talk to lots of punters every day of the week, and people say this is just ridiculous. I'm going to go out for the day, or I'm just not going to watch it. I'll watch the replay in the morning and see what I missed, or I'll put a bet on first thing in the morning and I'm not going to try and sit through it all. I mean, I think, as you say, 8 UK meetings, 2 in Ireland, 9 of them are on the same channel on racing TV. They all overlap. It's okay saying, you know, watch it behind the green button, the red button, the yellow button if you want to. It's not how people operate, is it? Apparently, in 1990 something, on the same day, there were 5 meetings, and that's absolutely perfect. You know, 3 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening. The thing that amazes me is the bookmakers will take the same money on it. They'll probably take it better, but you're sustaining an interest in the product. You're not um, throwing so much action at people that they can't follow it, keep up with it, bet on it. All the races overlap. I mean, and the Sunday is arguably worse. I mean, I love low grade jump racing. I'm like you, prefers the
Yeah.
jumps in truth. I like betting on it, but having we had about 20 races. I don't think there was more than 5 runners in 90% of them had 5 runners or less. It was extremely uncompetitive. I think 75% of the favourites. Well, now as a punter, okay, that might not be a bad thing. It might have been a profitable day's betting, but it's not going to attract anyone to go racing, is it? You know, I know they do the family fun days and the kids get in free. Great, but come on, it's in the middle of the flat season. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's okay saying we'll have a day off and all the rest of it, but there's no need for 3 jumps meetings on ground that's liable to be firm and water. There just isn't the horses to go around. I mean, I actually think as a one for another day is summer jumping is definitely going to be in big trouble sooner rather than later. I know I sort of speak to someone with horses with Dan Skelton, and he's got having used to target the summer jumps when he got going as a trainer. He's now only got 12 horses in for the summer jumps. That's probably someone who used to have 30 or 40 at least. You know, they plotted them up to win at Worcester in August and land the cash. But I think there's an awful lot of trainers just won't run their horses on pretty quick ground in the summer. And there just aren't enough horses to go round. I mean, the long and the short of it, and we've said this till we're blue in the face, there's far, far too much racing, full stop. That is the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure this grumble will go on. I mean, just I thought it was interesting. I think the Sunday series on the flat has been very successful. It doesn't seem to be exploited enough, having one really good flat card on the Sunday. They've been well packed, well attended, you know, deals with terrestrial television as well. So it's clearly that is working. That seems to be only running in foots and spurts, which seems a little bit odd to me on the face of it without being privy to the economics behind putting it all together. But yeah, definitely something we'll be considering in the future. Right, on to more equine stars themselves. Very quickly, I know you're going to give us a couple of horses that went into the notebook with Royal Ascot in mind, which of course is only a fortnight away now. It's amazing how quickly that has come around in the calendar. But on Sunday at Baden-Baden, Germany, we saw the ARC winner Torquato Tasso make his comeback. I think it's fair to say it was a flop. Woefully disappointing on that occasion. See, Connections have rolled out the kind of the excuses we would imagine would have come out of it, saying, look, the ground was just a bit too lively and they think the horse needed a run a lot more than perhaps they thought beforehand. I mean, do you see this horse as a genuine mudlark, or do you just think it was perhaps it was a once in a blue moon, a Leicester City win in the Arc de Triomphe, if you like, and that this horse
Hmm.
is not going to factor in any of the top Group 1 races over middle distances this season?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter camp, Ed. To be honest with you, we touched
Right.
on it, didn't we? In Jump to It last week. That when he won the art, everything panned out ideally. Dettori went for home far too soon, and things just worked out ideally for a patient ride out wide, and he swept clear. Obviously, heavy ground suited him ideally. That at the time it looked a bit of a freakish performance that's unlikely to have much bearing on things going forward, and I suspect that's the case. I mean, barring a monsoon in the next few weeks, Ascot's going to be probably on good or faster ground. So you can't imagine that'll be any use to him at all. He just looks like a mudlark. Maybe you'll see him at his best again. He might finish 6th or 7th in the Arc, come October. That might be his best chance to shine. But yeah, he looks like one who's going to be pretty hard to place for the rest of the summer, you'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be one to keep an eye on nonetheless, because they were mentioning the King George, weren't they, before the
Right.
weekend's race? Be interested to see whether they still consider that option or not. As I gather, you say that with all the action going on, a couple of horses did make it into the notebook for Royal Ascot only a fortnight away. Can you just enlighten viewers with ones we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, the first one's pretty obvious. I'm sure everyone has seen Statuette of Aidan
Mm,
O'Brien's
yep.
winning in Ireland at the weekend. I mean, apparently before the race in the paddock, she was twice the size of all the others. Absolutely ridiculous. Like one of those Wesley Ward sprinters that he used to bring over to Royal Ascot that looked about
Yep.
5 years old against 2 years old. And Statuette towered over them and was still quite green and inexperienced in the first half of the race, but stormed clear from a good guide in Olivia Moraldo, who's very well backed, and Michael Callaghan, very shrewd trainer. I think Statuette is probably the best filly seen out so far, and I think she's going to go straight to the Albany. She's 3-1 for that, which instinctively, you think, well, that's a bit of a, sounds like a thin price, probably be 25 runners and all the rest of it. But actually,
Could go
knowing
off
Aidan
odds on.
O'Brien's horses,
Yeah.
well, it could be. It
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
be at
Yeah.
all surprised if she's 11-10 on. I mean, I must admit,
Yeah.
I think I'd probably take 3-1. Anti-post betting is one thing. When they're 3 weeks away, she's definitely going for the race. Um,
Yeah.
you know, she's only going to get shorter and shorter. She's liable to improve at half a stone for that win, I would imagine, and that she's not going to be stopping at the line. That's for sure. She was really impressive. And the other one, only won narrowly, Chateau of Andrew Balding, won at Beverley in that 2-year-old trophy race,
Mm,
only won by an inch. But if you watch the run back, I'd say Chateau was value for 4 or 5. He's
right.
now, I think he might run maybe in something like the Norfolk, maybe, or something
Right.
at Royal Ascot.
Yeah.
Very exciting prospect. Definitely value for much further. His run got blocked about 4 or 5 times, and he only saw daylight in the last sort of furlong, and he absolutely flew. He made up about 4 lengths in 100 yards. It was really, really impressive. So yeah, he's firmly in the notebook.
Yeah, absolutely. Two notebook horses there. That's a Statuette with the Albany in mind, and Chateau. It was Will Buicombe, wasn't it, at the weekend? You look out for that individual with
Yeah,
some of the sprints, especially Royal Ascot in mind. We're going to cover the Derby at the end of the week show in more detail. Obviously, we've got the Oaks as well, Coronation Cup, the Derby. Just a very brief look at the weekend's action at Epsom, considering we've got the confirmations coming, haven't we, for both days. Emily Upjohn now. Best price 11-10. You're generally finding even money about John Gosden's filly. John Gosden has a stranglehold in the Oaks market, doesn't he? With Nashwa at 9-2, second favourite. Concert Hall and Tuesday, the Aidan O'Brien representatives, the next two in the market here. And anything leaping out off the page at you in regards to the Oaks market, first of all, Stephen?
Well, Emily Upjohn's obviously been really impressive, very taking winner at York. The only thing I think I've mentioned this before, with when Dettori was interviewed after that York rout, he said, "Well, we were all sort of struggling 3 furlongs out. I was riding her along. I thought we are all going to be struggle to get home, and she suddenly sort of picked up and outstayed them." Now, whether Epsom, which is undulating and tricky, would be ideal, maybe is a question mark. The other thing is she's 5-4 favourite. I mean, I think we've said this before as well, Ed, that Epsom is not a place for short prices. There's an awful lot can happen. I suspect there'll be a reasonably sized field. You probably want 5-4 getting a run and not getting pocketed in down the camber
Mm.
and able to get out. I thought the one who's overpriced, although I'm slightly worried how weak she is. I looked at the bookmakers; they were 6-7 to 1, and on the exchange, I think she's 14 to 1 Tuesday of Aidan O'Brien.
Mm.
Now maybe that 14 might suggest she's not going to run, but that would worry me a bit. So perhaps hold fire. But I thought she ran really well. I think that Irish 1,000 guineas that Homeless Songs won
Mm.
was probably the best race there's been so far for fillies. Now she is going to step up 4 furlongs in trip, which is a slight question mark. But on breeding, you think she'd be fine. And if you watch that Irish race back, she was absolutely cruising up the inside, and Homeless Songs came in and murdered her for
Mm.
pace. But she did stick on again in the last 100 yards. I think she's a really exciting prospect. And I quite like Aidan O'Brien's horses when he runs them. When they're running once a fortnight, they can sometimes be a bigger price than perhaps they should be because people think they're exposed. But he keeps running and they keep improving as the season goes on. So she'd be my selection at this stage. But it does look, John Gosden obviously holds the key in terms of the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, as you say, I'm with Concert Hall, as you know, for a long time
Oh,
now, who
yeah.
wasn't far behind her in the same race, was staying on well at the end. Obviously, her dam won the Oaks a decade ago. So, yeah, but I think myself and Stephen are both with Ballydoyle there to upset the Gosden juggernaut, if you like. Very quickly, we've got the Coronation Cup. Looks like Pile Driver is coming back for more in that. Frankie Dettoy's going to ride because Martin Dwyer's injured. And then the Derby. Desert Crown, around
Mm.
13 to 8 to win that for Sir Michael Stout. And possibly, you'd imagine, Richard Kingscote on board as well. Stone Age, a runaway winner in the Group 3 at Leopardstown last time out. Your second favourite, Nation Pride, has been supplemented for the race. Charlie Appleby confirmed today. Then we have Changing in the Guard, Piz Badil, Star of India, Walker Stars, etc., etc. United Nations, the Linkfield Derby trial winner, was the one I thought notable at admission at the confirmation stage.
Yeah.
Desert Crown, 13 to 8. Are you with or are you against?
Well, I mean, this is a horse, since he won at Nottingham in that maiden, really impressively, they've been absolutely raving. I think all the lads are on for the Derby. He was quite weak in the market before the Dante at York, but he routed them in the end. I mean, it was another one of those. I'm very sceptical about wide margin York winners. It just tends to be one of those tracks where they can get away and the others stop. He was impressive. I'm not sure beating Royal Patronage by a few lengths really entitled you to be 7-4 favourite for an 18, what could be an 18 runner Epsom Derby. I mean, I do think he is a terrible price. I really like the
Right.
horse, but I think he's far too short for one who's very inexperienced. I mean, he's worked at Epsom. They sent him there this week and he did a bit of work. So at least he's had a feel of the track, but it's a bit different if there's 17 others against him. I think it's going to be a big field because I think trainers going to fancy it. It's a sort of, yeah, you could get a right result. I mean, the favourite has only run twice. He's still inexperienced. What's he actually beaten? Will he handle the track? There are
Mm,
certain question marks. I think this will end up being 3-1 the field on the day. I don't think
interesting.
he'll be a
Mm,
short price. I think there'll be enough people who want to lay him. He was extremely weak before the Dante. I think it was
mm,
sort of 4-1 the field for the Dante
mm,
pre-race. So I think there'll be opposition. Aidan O'Brien runs lots of them. I see there's been money for Piz Badil, who's trained
mm.
by Donica. The only
Yeah,
thing is the
Frankie will
form of
ride.
that
Yeah,
win in Ireland. Yeah, that's probably why he's shortened up.
yeah,
That's a fair comment.
yeah.
The form of his win in Ireland hasn't really worked out. The second and third have been beaten since, I think. So he's got a bit to prove, not least of all stamina. It's one of those races, Ed. I think
Mm.
something will win it at 25-1. What
What?
that is, I don't know. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
to say to our listeners, I think you do worse than lay under 2-1 Desert Crown now, because I think he'll be a bigger price on the day and you'll earn from it. I can't imagine he can put it this way. He's not going to be 5-4, is he? But you could imagine him
No.
being 11-4. I think 7-4 is a bit of a lazy price. He's just a name, Sir Michael Stout. Um, I think he's a very, very short price.
Okay, very, very short price. No doubt we will discuss everything to do with Epsom in more detail on the show at the end of the week, including the Derby. We'll be going through that with a fine tooth comb. I think that pretty much brings about conclusion for the Monday Review show there, Stephen. Many thanks for your thoughts and input on
Yeah.
today's programme and episode. Lots of different stuff I'm sure there'll be lots of fallout from what's been happening at the weekend on the track. And of course, most reflections going with the passing of Lester Piggott, who passed away at the age of 86. What spellbinding career he had. As I've said, many thanks to you for watching at home. Keep in touch. Keep your eyes peeled on irishracing.com for all the latest news and features. And don't forget to check out all Stephen's tips on bettingexpert.com. If you do like to have a bet, please do gamble responsibly. We'll see you at the end of the week. Bye for now.